just going over the plan. So you're going to start us off. Well, I'll start actually getting us kicked off and talk a little bit. And then you're going to start tonight. And then following you will be Brenny. Following Brenny will be Janet. Following Janet will be Carrie. And then Brian and I and Mackenzie will be monitoring along the way.
And then could you just, it's been a day, a week.
Okay.
If you could like review the goals for this, just to share what
Sure.
we're doing within.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that as we broadcast, if that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
All right. We're live and ready to go.
All right, Mackenzie, I'm going to take the screen over then and present share a slide deck with everybody. And we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome. This is our August, is not August though. This is our April Network and Learn. And oh my goodness, I am at the bottom of this slide deck. What happened here? Hang on one moment, guys. Apologize. Try that again because we are in April. It's our April Network and Learn, and we're delighted to have a wonderful panel tonight to talk about how we've used universal design for learning to overcome barriers to continuous and remote learning. This is a perspective from leaders from across the U.S., across disciplines, across leadership hats, so to speak, the size of the people that they lead. They're going to tell their story about how they've used UDL and the power of design to bring their people along with them as we're moving from our traditional, more traditional face-to-face and blended learning to this idea of continuous and remote learning. So our goal for today is really to talk about how UDL has helped us as a group and individually as our entities move forward, making that transition, that difficult transition from synchronous learning to asynchronous and remote learning. So hopefully we'll be able, our panelists will share with us some of the strategies they've used and how UDL has helped prepare both their organization and the people in it to make this shift. So tonight our moderators are myself. My name is Sue Harden and I'm in Michigan. I am a UDL implementation facilitator and assistive technology consultant, and I'm part of the UDL IRN crew. Also joining is Brian Dean. Brian, you want to wave? You want to talk for a minute?
Sure. I'm Brian Dean. I'm a UDL vagabond, and there you go, an educational nomad. See ya.
And Mackenzie Nicholas. Mackenzie, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mackenzie Nicholas. I am the Network Engagement Manager for the UDL IRN at CAST.
Great. And the three of us will be facilitating tonight's learning. And so we'll be working with the panelists as they share information. I wanted to mention two things: that we are live streaming on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, I think Mackenzie is pushing out the link right now. You can join us on the at the UDL IRN hashtag on Twitter and ask questions of our panelists. Those of you who are watching locally can ask in the chat, or you can also get on Twitter as well. If you want to tweet out what's happening in the Network and Learn, we encourage you to do that. Share that with others who maybe haven't decided to tune in quite yet to this Network and Learn. Perhaps they'll jump into the YouTube Live or ask questions and be interested in the conversations that we're having. So hashtag UDL IRN will get your questions answered, and also a great way to share the great information and enthusiasm of this panel that's here today. So speaking of our panel, we will introduce everybody individually as well, but I just wanted to see the lovely faces of those who will be speaking tonight. So we have Janet Good from Florida, and she is a project coordinator at the PSRTI and Technology and Learning Connections. We have Brenny, is it Kummer? Is that how you say it, Brenny? I don't want to get it wrong.
It's Coomer.
Coomer, okay? I had a 50-50 chance.
It's all good.
Brenny Coomer, and she's a coordinator of instructional technology at BCSC, and Kathy Wall is the director of the Inclusion Collaborative at Santa Clara County in California, and Carrie Wozniak is the superintendent of Fraser Schools in Michigan. And so Kathy won the draw tonight, and she will be starting first. So she's going to share with us how they use the UDL framework to really move the educators in Santa Clara County from face-to-face learning to remote learning in her Inclusion Collaborative. So Kathy, I'll give that back to you.
Let me unmute. Well, good evening, everybody, wherever you're watching from. I'm Kathy from the Inclusion Collaborative with the Santa Clara County Office of Education, and I'm very honored to be part of this. We have had quite a past 3 weeks in Santa Clara County. San Jose is one of the higher number of COVID-19 cases. So we have been in shelter in place since March 17th. And we found out Monday, March 16th. So it has been a very dramatic experience for the way our educators are teaching their kids in all our school districts. We have 32 school districts, and then we also have our County Office of Education. We have quite a few resources that we have implemented within our Inclusion Collaborative. But the first thing we always think UDL as a framework is you got to identify your barriers. So we know everyone's very stressed out. We know everyone needs simple directions. We know people need it in their language. We know that we need to have easily accessible information. The first week, it was a plethora of resources coming down from us, of links to go and search. And my daughter, who's a parent and also a speech therapist, said, don't send me any more links. I can't do it anymore of that. So that was another UDL moment for me, that we have to realize what our users are needing at that point. So our districts are a variety of different levels of going to distance learning. Some of our districts are using Zoom. Others districts are not allowing Zoom because of privacy issues. So there's been a lot of those type of issues. But the Inclusion Collaborative, what we've really established is we already had a warm line, inclusion support warm line, that we had available. And we ramped it up to 16 hours a day. We've got people covering it. And we are open for people to call us, and we've promoted to get resources, to get visuals, to get supports, to quite honestly just talk sometimes. And that's been really awesome. This week, last week, we had so many calls from parents that we decided let's have a parent chat. So we did a Zoom family resource chat for families, and we had 140 plus people Zoom in to listen and talk. So people really want that. So it's helped us again evolve what we're going to be supporting folks with. They need that connection with others, even if they are virtual. So that's been very eye-opening. And so since then, we've now become the special ed clearinghouse, so that people call the warm line, and then we direct special ed questions to all the different school districts. So we don't have a lot of phone calls back and forth. And we do have a lot of districts doing different things and different processes. So again, it's our users are all different. We have some districts that are just now passing out Chromebooks so their students can have access. We have some districts that are allowing their parking lots to be open and people can come and park there and use their internet. So there's been a lot of really nice mobilization of letting resources be shared. And when parents share with us their concerns, we march it up through our chain so that our superintendent's aware of it, and then she makes some supports with it. We also have been supporting RAFT, which is our teacher warehouse clearing center of extra stuff. And the volunteers have been putting together educational kits that will go home with the families at the food distribution. So the Inclusion Collaborative has been very busy doing different translations of different languages so that families can have these actual kits to do stuff at home, and then a phone number to call back and get some support. So we're just trying to make it as easily accessible by everyone. Another project we've been doing is working with our First Five, which is our Birth to Five programs. And they are supporting all the family resource centers, which is like a hub in all of our different pockets of our neighborhoods. And we're supplying activity boxes that they can go home with. And one of them is our calming kit, so that families can have strategies for calming and working with self-regulation at home. Because quite honestly, there's a lot of families that the parents are teachers or emergency workers and the kids are home. So it's trying to think through definitely outside the box of different solutions and listening to what people say. So there's it's UDL, constant iterations. What's working well this week? We know next week, probably families are going to be more tired and more crabby. So we're doing another family resource chat because everyone wanted another one. We're going to do one in Spanish. We're going to partner with our Family Resource Center. So we're just trying to come together as a county to really leverage all the resources out there. But again, what are the barriers? That's the first thing we've got to think about. And there's nothing worse as a tired parent getting a link for a possible resource that you have to then go in and go in and go in. We need a one button access, which is why we like our warm line, because we have live voices answering it. So I think that summarizes it all. Every day I get new responsibilities. And so it's been great. But again, that UDL framework and looking through the lens of UDL has been powerful. We also have some online modules that we've used with our California one, which is on the learning design platform. And we've sent it out to our districts to use because districts are looking for what PD are available for their staff. So again, that's a partnership with all the, again, communication and knowing who's out there and what their needs might be. So have I said enough?
You said a lot of wonderful things about, I think there's some
We're
questions
exhausted,
out there.
but it's good.
Yeah, that is good. Mackenzie, anything that we need from Twitter? I have a few questions here. So anything from Twitter?
Nothing on the Twitter end.
Okay. So Kathy, could you tell us a little bit more about your warm line and how that works? And I also had some interest in the kits that you're putting together. And do you have access to, or are you
I can
sharing
certainly, so
kind
I
of
probably should have you just put my email down and people can email me.
Okay.
And if you go to inclusioncollaborative.org, that's our website, and on there's the warm line, and it talks about our extended hours that we have.
Okay, great.
And so we've actually had this line already set up for about 14 years, which we've been supported by a private funder, which has been great. Our local First Five has given us funding to have more language capabilities. So it's kind of morphed over. I mean, it's actually been waiting for this to happen because we've got a lot of resources already that people need to get their hands on. There are families home with, 3 children with autism. What do they do? I mean, so we've done, we had a whole parent chat on daily schedules. I mean, I need a daily schedule. If I'm working it remotely at home, I have to write down exactly what I need to do so I don't forget what I'm doing. And so can you imagine these families are really stressed with trying to coordinate school and work and
So Kathy, we did have a question come in that's it's kind of around the calming packs. If you can kind of elaborate on those, what things go into those, and then how are you getting those to parents?
Well, they're being mobilized through our First Five in activity kits. And so if you want to go to the Discovery Source, or you can go to the Inclusion Collaborative website and go to professional development. At the bottom of it, you can see it's a project we've had going for a while with a publisher. And I was on a webinar today for Head Start Region 9, which is 4 states, and we had over 1,000 people wanting to know about the calming kit. And then now we're developing the family calming kit because everyone's at home and we need calming kits everywhere. So it's a kit, and you can put it together yourself, of self-regulation strategies that you can teach kids how to identify your emotions. We have 5 breaths. You take deep breaths. We have a social story about calming down. We've got calming card strategies in it. So those are some nice visuals that parents can use at home. to help with a lot of the anxiety. And quite honestly, they can use some of these tools themselves. Any other
Excellent.
questions?
I don't have any that are coming through just at this time, but
Okay.
we'll definitely have some, I'm sure.
So
Okay.
Kathy, I was able to find the link to your kit, and I did put the link to that in the chat. So if
Oh,
somebody,
good.
if you guys would like to see a little more detail about that, that's in there. Will you be able to hang around for a little while, or we're gonna?
I
have
will
some-
hang around for a little while.
Okay, I know you've had a long day.
I
so if
started
you
at
need to-
7 packing. Yeah.
If you need to slip out, you can go ahead.
We've been trying to get volunteers and no one wants to come out because it's so it's
Yeah.
ended up being a small group of people doing 27 boxes this week. So, but it's good. It's good work.
It is
We're
good
almost done.
work. Exhausting, but good work.
Good work.
All right, I'm going to bring my slide presentation back up and keep those questions coming in for Kathy as they come to you. And we're going to actually have Brenny share next. I'm going to bring up her slides here. I got to move this out of the way. This is one of the challenges of jumping in and out of the presentation. It's nice to see faces as they're talking, but it does make things move a little bit slower. Okay, so Brenny is, as I mentioned earlier, the coordinator of instructional technology at BCSC. She is from Indiana and has been doing a lot of work getting teachers and support service people up and running at BCSC in the throes of this COVID-19 blackout and isolation. So Brenny, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll mute my mic and you go ahead and.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. Thank you for being a part of this tonight. Like Sue said, I'm from Columbus, Indiana, and we were a little bit later in the game in getting our schools canceled and moving into virtual learning days. Something that has been helpful for us, though, at least, is that virtual learning days are not something that is completely uncharted territory for us. This whole scenario is, but we've had virtual learning days and e-learning days before in the past. So I feel pretty fortunate that we had a little bit of a foundation there, which has helped us some, but there's definitely been some unique challenges that we've had to plan for. And UDL has been really helpful in identifying those challenges and finding out ways to remove some of those barriers along the way. So I am the coordinator of instructional technology in BCSC, which is in South Central Indiana. We have about 11,500 students. We're not your typical Southern Indiana town in that we're a very diverse community. We're not like very many of our surrounding school districts because we are a manufacturing hub for major engine companies like Cummins, Toyota, Forcia. We have a lot of families who come here from different countries and a lot of different languages spoken in our schools because of that. And Universal Design for Learning has been something that's been a part of our district for quite some time now. It's our instructional framework. It drives every decision that we do. So it's been helpful to use that as our guide map, even in virtual learning days. Next slide, please. So a little bit more context into our students and our school districts. We have about 19 school buildings, 11 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 2 high schools, 1 additional high school that is a project-based learning school. We also have buildings where we have pre-K, career and technical education, and adult and alternative education pathways. So those all really stemmed from Universal Design for Learning and making sure that we provide our students with different options that fit what their learning goals are. Like I said, we're a pretty diverse community, 11% ELL. We have 60 languages spoken throughout our district. We have 36 different ones spoken in 1 elementary school alone. We have 13% of our students that are special education students, 45% free and reduced. And from a technology standpoint, we know that 70% of our students have reliable internet access at home, 20% kind of reliable, and then 10% who don't have any type of internet access at home. So knowing that going into this was helpful, but we've also figured out that there were a lot more students that live in multifamily households that, because of the scenario right now, are maybe living or working with grandma and grandpa during the day, or can't go to typical daycare where maybe they would have internet access. So that's something that kind of altered our learner context because of the unique circumstances. Next slide, please. So like I said, universal design for learning has been a core element in what we do in BCSC. And I feel pretty fortunate that that foundation was established, but it's been interesting tweaking it and using it is in a different way than we have before because of these circumstances. Whenever in BCSC we make any type of decision, UDL is what guides that decision, from selection of our learning management system to the decision to go one-to-one with laptops, iPads, and Chromebooks across our different grade levels. It's supported us in all of those different ways. Next slide, please. And what's interesting is that helped us design a little bit for this current situation, but it's helping us realize there's some changes and challenges as well. Our ultimate goal is supporting universal design for learning in student and teacher variability right now. And the first thing that we do usually when our UDL coaches, we have some that are split up against different buildings, they kind of flow in between different ones. They support our staff and our students, and they look at the learning environment, and it's usually the physical learning environment. So now it's taking some of those reflective pieces that our coaches use to support our teachers and our administrators and thinking, okay, this is what a physical learning environment in terms of UDL, some things to look out for. Next slide, please. And really showing our teachers that we need to make sure that we incorporate that in a digital learning environment too. So right off the bat, before we could even focus on all of those different pieces within our lessons, it was key for us to identify what are some initial barriers here to engagement that are going to cause some problems if we don't address those right away. Materials pickup being one of them. We knew that right before we went on spring break for a week, that after that, we were going to have e-learning days. Initially, it was only going to be for 2 weeks. That has definitely changed since then. We're out for the rest of the school year. So fortunately, we were able to gather our one-to-one devices, send them home with students, but that didn't catch all of our students. It didn't address the fact that we need to make sure we have other options like paper resources, books, novels going home with some of our high school students. So right after spring break, we had a plan that we need to have materials pickup day where families could come up, and it was principals and counselors and deans and secretaries out there passing out devices to students, running into the building, grabbing students' materials and getting them to them, making sure that we were following social distancing guidelines as we did that. It was pretty hectic. I have a friend who's a counselor, and she said she walked 40,000 steps that day, trying to deliver all of those different things. So that was a little crazy, but even afterwards, we realized that that didn't catch all of our students then either. So we've had principals deliver those to students that they know needed those materials and weren't there that day. For another barrier that we identified is that some of our devices might be damaged. Maybe our students are using those as regularly in a normal classroom setting as they are at home when they need to have that for their virtual learning lessons. So how do we support those students? We set up a device exchange schedule at our technology office. We would have families call in. We have a hotline that families could call in, schedule an appointment, swap out, get the new device, give them a little crash course on how they need to use that new device. Usually it's the same one that they usually use in the learning environment. But again, that was another thing we need to make sure we have in place, was to help our learners get the tools that they need to be successful. And like I said, we have an e-learning helpline. We had translators who are answering those calls and checking voicemail because we have so many different languages spoken in our community. That was a must. And our translators have really, really helped us out a lot. They're amazing. They have contacts in a lot of the buildings and families they're in contact with regularly, and they know some of their needs, and they've been able to spread the word on calling us for help if they need it. But another big barrier for us was, and I'm sure a lot of schools are facing this too, is internet access. We have some areas in our school district where it's very rural. Internet providers don't even give service to those areas. Cell phone coverage is iffy sometimes. So how do you support those students? We followed kind of what was said before me, that we extended Wi-Fi signals into parking lots, which helped, but we also wanted to make sure we had other options for our students too. We distributed, I think about 50 hotspots today We got those from Verizon. That was kind of an interesting struggle to get those because we're competing against businesses and other school districts, but our tech director, who's in this chat as well, drove up to Indy to grab those from the vendor. But a key thing for us too is making sure that we have online and offline options for our students, because not all of them are going to have internet access. And that's just the reality. We're doing the best we can to give our students a means to participate virtually, but that's not always something we're going to be able to address. So Universal Design for Learning has been instrumental in helping us resolve some of those issues. Next slide, please. And I did get a little ahead of myself here with the physical learning environment piece, but coaching our teachers on making sure that you take some of those elements that you would have in a physical learning environment and try to put those in our virtual learning environment as well. So some example ones that are on here is a clear goal, an agenda so students know what's going to happen, access to assistive technologies and tools that they need to complete learning environments, and then flexible means to do that. Next slide, please. So these are some of the key questions that we pose to our teachers, and this is not something that just came out of randomness when we had e-learning days announced. We have been prepping teachers on this regularly. We have quite a bit of professional development opportunities related to e-learning days throughout the school year. And these are always the ways that we frame it, that what tools do you have out there to get learners excited, motivated to learn in your virtual learning environment? What does that look like? What resources do you have out there? And are they low tech, no tech, and high tech? We have learner variability that we need to address. So we need to have options for that sense, but also we have internet variability too. And if all of your lesson resources are video, that's a lot of bandwidth, and you are leaving students out by putting those as the only option on there. And then the same thing with expression. What are the different ways that students can show what they've learned? So I'm just going to go through a couple of examples here that I grabbed from teachers' lessons this week and last week, with their permission, of course, and they're just ways that we're using UDL to kind of solve some of these problems and make our virtual learning environment an inclusive space the best that we can. Next slide, please. So this was a very specific to our learning management system, which is It's Learning, but you can borrow this, use this however you want. It's a crosswalk between our learning management system tools and Universal Design for Learning. And the highlighted sections on there just show just some basic things to strive for if you're just getting started and you're a little nervous. You don't have to use every single one of these tools. It's kind of a guidepost that start from the top and then work your way down as you feel more comfortable with your learning management system and you get more familiar with those tools. And it's examples of how you can support different elements of the framework with those tools. A lot of them are tools repeated within multiple categories because I felt like it was important to show our teachers that you don't have to master 50 different tools to be able to support UDL online. There's a couple of tools that if you have those in your toolbox, you're going to be fine. They have options and flexible resources built in within that one tool. Next slide, please. So for us, it was looking at the different elements of the framework and what that could look like with our learning management system and a K-12 environment. So making sure we have a lesson goal and resources in one place, not scattered across the course. It's really important that you're trying to minimize the number of clicks that a student or a parent that's helping the student with the lesson needs to use to get to a particular resource. It was also important, and something that I feel like our teachers are doing a wonderful job of, is making sure that they have multiple means of explaining the lesson goal and resources. They're including pictures of where to go, pictures on what to do as a part of the lesson goal and resource, videos of the teacher explaining it, or an audio recording. And we have all of those abilities within our learning management system. Putting in some type of engagement piece, whether it's just a really short survey or poll, just to check in with students, or maybe it's a morning meeting. Some of those things that you would typically have in a physical classroom setting, bringing those into the virtual environment as well. So it still has some of those similar elements. Letting teachers and students know that they have the ability to ask for help when they need it, even though you're not physically there. It's been really important for our staff to know that they have us as a resource through our hotline. They can call that number, but students also have that resource and they can message each other as well. And making sure that our staff know that it's important to put asynchronous content on there. We have some families that maybe they don't have internet access until later in the day when they're at home instead of with their childcare provider. We have some families that are first responders and work crazy hours, and they don't get to be online from 9 to 3 when the staff member is online to answer questions. So making sure that you put as many asynchronous options out there as possible. And then we've really leveraged our counselors and deans during this time too, and they've really been the ones who look up data in our learning management system on who's been logging in, if the student's been interacting with anyone, and if we need to follow up with them and give them paper resources or check in with them and just do a mental health check. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of our learning management system and what the options for engagement look like. Just making sure we have a goal there, the why behind the goal, and the resources below it. And the other examples here are teachers who had their goal and then had a video introducing the lesson for the day, saying some of those phrases and doing their morning meeting like they would if they were in person. And then the ability to translate the page there as well for the students who need that extra support. Next slide, please. So in terms of using UDL to remove additional barriers for representation, our teachers have, like I said, they've been putting options there, but it's been important that this translates beyond just the learning goal, that the resources themselves are flexible and there's options there too. So if you're using a video, make sure you're using a video that has closed captions or has closed captions automatically generated. If you're doing any type of video conference, we've been really encouraging our teachers to use Google Hangouts Meet, doing a recording of that if you have permission to, or if you're going to do that, it's just staff members' face that you're recording so that students who aren't able to hop on for that synchronous conference call have the ability to still participate later on. Like I showed in the last slide, there was an example there of translating content or reminding our students that they have access to tools to help them translate materials, and then providing choice in learning resources so that we address learner variability and internet variability too. So putting low tech, no tech, high tech options out there, whether that's having a student look and read through their physical textbook, or it's having them look at a story online or watch a video, that every student has a pathway there to participate and they're not being marginalized because of that. Next slide, please. So here are some examples. The first one there is a teacher who had recorded her Google Hangout. She has a scrolling thing of every Hangout that the class has done and she records them. The middle option there is actually from one of our occupational therapists. They have done a wonderful job in putting lots of flexible options out there for our students. She adds audio recordings every single day, has a picture there of activities the students can do in a choice board, and then has video tutorials there. And I know that they also had paper materials they sent home too. The other options there are just giving students choice in learning resources so that they have different ways to participate, no matter their internet speed or what resource they want to select. Next slide, please. And the last bit here is options for our students to show their understanding. And this is where our teachers have gotten really creative, and I've really pushed them to be creative, and I want to see their ideas. And even if they're not tooting their own horn and willing to be saying, look at all the awesome things I'm doing, I reached out to their instructional coaches, and they're really the ones who connect back with me and say, look at these awesome things that they're doing. Share these ideas with other people. And that's been the really exciting piece, is that we're showing our students that there's different things to do other than just being on your laptop, typing out a response. It's modeling for our students by showing them the teacher creates audio recordings and video recordings, that students have those abilities too. When they respond to different assignment prompts. And again, low tech, no tech, high tech options has been, I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but it's something that I tell my teachers a lot because it is so important. We have lots of teachers who give students the choice in how they show their understanding, and they usually leave an option there for the student to come up with their own idea. We have had students who have created models of things using materials in their own house and then put a picture of that on our online learning management system. So that's a really awesome way for a student to have a really great learning experience and have some ownership in that and autonomy. And that wouldn't be possible if that option didn't exist there for the student to show their understanding in their own creative way. Our teachers have been providing students with checklists, which is really important. This is a lot of different classes and tasks to manage. And like the speaker said before me, I know I have to make a checklist if I'm working from home because I get distracted or I'm just not in my normal setting and it throws me off. So our special education teachers have been awesome about checking in and making sure that we have checklists, but our other teachers are making those for their classes as well and sending students a copy of that they have editing access to, so they can cross things off. And we've actually had a couple of our teachers who have said that they've checked in with students and asked them what's working, what's not. And so many of the students are saying, make sure you keep giving me a checklist. That has helped me more than anything else, which is, you know, the students, if you ask them, they will tell you what they need and you'll learn a lot from that. And then really just making sure that it's an emphasis on quality over quantity. The last thing we need is for a student to sit in front of a device for 8 hours on end and be upset and be frustrated. If you give them quality options and quality content and it reaches that goal, then it doesn't need to be 7 hours long. It can be if a student gets really excited and wants to do that, but the idea is meeting that learning goal and making sure that it's quality learning, not hours and hours just to check off a box. Next slide, please. And here are some of the examples across different grade levels on the different options that our teachers have provided to students. So there's an audio recording, video recording. The one over there in the bottom right corner is from a first grade classroom, and that was an opportunity for students to practice sight words using household materials, and that was one of the options the students had, or they could do writing or a video. So again, low tech, no tech, high tech options there for our students, and then another choice board there as well. Next slide, please. And this is my last one. I kind of got into showing you some of those examples, so I'm sorry I probably ran over my time a little bit. And this is just kind of summing things up and just lessons learned from our end. And this is we definitely don't have all the answers, but we're working through this and learning as we're going, which is really, I guess, the true nature of UDL, is that the work never stops. We've learned that it's important to address some of those key barriers to engagement first, and you have to be creative with those. If it's extending Wi-Fi signals or having families contact you and you walk them through a process on how to resolve something, it's interesting to try to work through those, but it's important to give families the outlet to do that. Designing virtual environments with UDL as your guide. Looking at what barriers might be there. Some of them might be similar to a physical learning environment. Some of them might not be. And making sure you're aware of different options that exist and reaching out to your coaches as well. And making sure that there is asynchronous options. Leveraging familiar tools of your learning management system first. The last thing I wanted to do was bombard teachers with 100 emails from different tech companies, as I know I've been feeling overwhelmed from those, saying, look, we have these new tools and they're free and they're awesome. I love that they're doing great things by giving tools for free, but that can be overwhelming for a teacher. So encouraging them to use the familiar things first, and then they can grow from there. Quality over quantity, and relying on your support system. So your administrators, your coaches, looking to them for ideas. A couple of our UDL coaches actually did a really awesome thing, and I'm going to give them a shout out. Their names are Corey Williams and Laura Ousley. I don't know if they're on right now. I know the spouse of one of them is on, but they made UDL design challenges, and it's a series of different things that teachers could do, and it's a really great tool for reflecting on the learning environment, but also kind of learning some different tools along the way. So it's a way to help teachers learn how to use tools within the LMS learning management system, but also improve UDL too. So it was a way to kind of give some advice, but make it a fun challenge too, and help teachers earn some professional learning points along the way. And lastly, because this is also new and foreign to us, reflecting, reiterating, revising, learning, and growing along the way, because we don't have all the answers, but we can keep trying. And that's what I got.
Wow, Brenny, thank you so much for sharing that with us. This is all such awesome information from everyone. You know, I was reflecting on the conversations that Kathy shared and Brenny shared, and noticing lots of similarities. And we know that this is because we have this UDL framework that we think through. And I was just curious if either of you wanted to talk a little bit about how empathy, you know, is the first stage of design thinking, or first thing we think about in UDL too. We think about our learners, and now that's really expanded. We don't just now think about our learners and our educators. Now we're thinking about our learners, educators, and families, right? And so I'm just wondering how that shift has kind of shown up in the work that you do, just in a couple brief sentences.
I can go first, and absolutely. I mean, if you don't come alongside people and meet them where they are, you might as well. Well, we are staying home, but I was gonna say you might as well go home, but we are home. I mean, really, you must come alongside them and meet with them where they are. And I love Brenny. I mean, you just knocked it out there. That was awesome. There's so many resources being thrown at us, and let's just calmly do what we know to do and build our repertoire and get comfortable with this new system. So
Yeah.
empathy is all about it. Yes. And again, we have to, if we don't fail, then we're not doing UDL, right? So if it doesn't work, we try something else.
That's right. Brenny, you want to add to that at all?
I would say ditto to a lot of what Kathy just said. I think the main thing is just a lot of our families, this is the first time they've really used a lot of these tools and resources. So the thing I keep telling teachers is take a step back and think the first time I showed you this learning management system, your reactions. But now I'm asking you to complete all of these lessons at the same time. So I think that's been helpful and really been great for our teachers to take that perspective, but also for us administrators and people on the tech side too, that this is all foreign and new, and compassion goes a long way, especially right now. And it's important to keep that as your focus.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Brian McKenzie, other questions for Brenny that came in?
Yeah, so we had some that came through the chat, and then I have a couple myself that just kind of are rattling around in my noggin. But one of the big questions that came, I'm trying to sort through it and find it here. Yeah, so in regards to delivering those materials, how are you do you have a kind of some kind of delivery system or mechanism in place for the places that like you're not allowed to go? Places that might be quarantined and you can't actually visit. Like, how are you getting those materials to those individuals?
We haven't necessarily run into that obstacle yet, but I know it's only a matter of time, honestly. The cases in our community are growing and growing. So what we've been doing so far is that we communicate with the principal of the building. Usually the person calls into the hotline and says, I have not been able to do anything. And then I pull up my laptop, I send an email, or I call the principal and say, hey, we need to get the materials, devices, whatnot to this person. So it's been either driving to the location and putting it on the front porch of that person's house and letting them know that you're there, or it's arranging for them to stop by the school, put it on a table outside of the school, step back. So that's how we've been doing that. But I think that as things change, we might have to even evolve that process even more.
Kathy, anything to add to that? You're muted, Kathy.
There have been several delivery paths. We have quite a range, Silicon Valley, very super techie to farm workers, restaurant, I mean, really low income families who don't speak the language. So it has been a challenge. A lot of what some of like the Head Start programs are reaching out by phone, and it's the cell phone and the text messages that have been just communicating ongoing with them. They try to call 2 times a week. And then if families are interested, they're mobilizing packets out to get to them. How they're doing it, I don't know. We have district school-wide lunches that are being distributed at school within different school districts. Well, all the school districts. And if you get a free and reduced lunch, then you have lunch that you can pick up 3 times a day in a bag. And it's a drive-through process. Typically, they check your name off, and that's how they've done the Chromebooks and other packets that they're sending out. But it's been tough. And so we're learning every day, pretty much, what works and what doesn't.
Okay, thank you. So there's another question, and it's regarding the non-digital resources. Is there any plan for parents to be able to request more throughout the year? Or if a student finishes a book, are they going to be able to request more of those? And also, do you know of any kind of like online forms to provide books for students that you could give quick shout outs to as far as resources?
So we are actually focusing, I know our elementary team has been focused on answering that very question this week and last week and kind of figuring out how to get additional resources out there, because we've been doing this for a couple weeks now and students are completing the paper resources or they're ready to move on to the next thing. So I know that right now what they've been doing is creating some resources, and the plan is to distribute those at some of our lunch sites as well, because we're doing lunches too. But also, I know that there was conversation that we get a lot of like Scholastic and Tween Tribune paper magazines that are delivered to our buildings. We've gotten those for free, and they've kept sending those and distributing those to our students too as additional reading material.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that's kind of what we have. And I think that we should probably move on for our time there, Sue.
We'll do that. And at the next break, Brian, we're going to come back to you for those questions you were having that were rattling around in your head too. So we're going to go back to share my screen, and we're actually going to ask Janet to come up and share a little bit about what they've been doing in Florida. Janet, if you would just start off by describing your role and what you do in Florida so that our folks understand exactly the position that you'll be describing the work that you're doing from. That would be awesome.
Sure, Sue. Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here tonight with you all. And first and foremost, I hope everybody is safe and taking care of yourself first and foremost, because we're only going to be as good as helping others as when we take care of ourselves. And this is challenging times. I feel like I sit in front of this right here in this position for 10 hours a day. But I have to say the connections I get to make with people have been invaluable. So I'm going to speak about a state perspective. I am the coordinator for the Technology and Learning Connections team. Our project is a discretionary project, part of the Department of Education. Our charge is to provide guidelines and resources to support the implementation of the Florida standards, assistive and instructional technology, accessible educational materials, and universal design for learning. We also run our state AT and UDL loan library. We have over 7,000 devices that are loaned to over 700 patrons across the state, so school districts. So that part of our project kind of is in a standstill, right? So many devices were out with patrons, and at this point, if they're in the homes with families, that's where they need to stay, right? So there's no sense about getting that back, and we're working with the AT specialists in districts to continue to coach and model and support the families in using that device. Typically, those devices are loaned for a 6-8 week trial, but right now we just want to keep and maintain that support when it comes to the assistive technology loan library. The other scope of our project is providing training and support statewide. So, Florida is unique in that we have 5 districts that rank in the nation as part of the 10 largest districts in the country, from Miami-Dade with over 335 schools to half of our districts, 34 of our 67 districts are small and rural that have anywhere from 3 to 20 schools. So again, that scope of the support we're trying to support, we have, Wi-Fi issues, and they've been very creative in actually putting Wi-Fi on buses and driving buses to places, right? Because those families cannot even get to the parking lot in schools. And honestly, in some of the hot spots, they really don't want families even leaving their home to go to those parking lots, because they're bringing the other kids and they have to eat and they want to play on the playground. So it's created a lot of chaos for so many families. And so for us, and for me, I've tried to work with our project for everybody to take a big sigh and just take a deep breath and really be present in how we can be there to support people as we problem solve the situations that we're facing. One thing, Florida was very early in canceling the statewide testing. So that was a temporary sigh of relief, because then kind of that that urgency to provide supports for families kind of presented another unique challenge. And we wanted to not contribute to that stress. We wanted to take, a deep breath. Districts were charged individually for creating distance learning plans. And so, here they're trying to figure out how to support learning activities at home in ways that they had never thought about before, even though we've been talking about unique ways to provide learning opportunities. It was a new challenge for many of our districts. So the first thing we did was we do a quarterly newsletter. And so that we focus on the continuity of learning in our newsletter. Glenn, being very strategic in the focus of looking at tools and strategies to support distant learning so that we weren't contributing to that bombardment of so many resources coming from, from all sides for families. The need to really reflect and develop a networked learning system that incorporated classrooms and homes, both physical and virtual instruction for families. And knowing that this network system had to be universally designed and accessible to meet the needs of all students, right? Which is very challenging, and many times we know good intention, you think all students, but now we really had to think about all students. And so we got our newsletter. It goes out to close to 3,000 people. And we continue to just kind of give that as our resource. So we weren't contributing to that bombardment of things coming from all directions. In that newsletter, we highlighted a student profile form that could help both teachers and parents to ensure that the instructional activities match students' strengths and challenges. Again, looking at those UDL principles to design instruction to ensure that the flexibility was there to meet the needs of all students embedded in the lessons. And so kind of going back to some of our foundation pieces of what we know is best practice and staying, in that lane. We also had to respond to looking at both asynchronous and synchronous learning opportunities. The first thing we did as our project was create open office Zoom hours. And the intent there was just to be present and be available to answer questions. When we can't physically get together, even though you could pick up a phone, our phones have all been forwarded, email comes to everybody, but to be in person, right, to connect, it's reassuring to see Sue's face. I know Sue, right? I may be calling about, I can't return this device, but it was really more about just that assurance and kind of calming your system down and knowing it was going to be okay. Wherever that device was, it didn't matter. So really being available. The other thing we've been doing for the past 2 weeks was creating virtual conversations. We had 4 a day, 4 on Monday and Wednesday, the same topic, from Office 365 to aided language to Google Classroom, environmental communication teaching. So these 1-hour conversations around these topics provided a forum, and they're not recorded. It just became an opportunity to problem solve and discuss something on time, conversations around that topic. So we've been doing that for 2 weeks. That kind of gave us a sense of what our patrons and the people we support, districts, needed as we move forward. And we just wrapped those up today. Again, also focusing on the guidelines and looking at the executive functioning piece of our guidelines, that people are being realistic and selecting some goals to support those families. We also have larger statewide virtual conversations in a town hall format. Our first one was Wednesday a week ago around assistive technology, and it was a collaborative effort with our state access project supporting students with intellectual disabilities, as well as the teachers supporting those students. and our other discretionary project for the deaf hard of hearing. And we had over close to 200 administrators and teachers join that. It was not a presentation, it was more this kind of format where we started in the registration. We asked 5 questions, things that they needed answered today, something they wanted to share, were they willing to speak online? And so that gave us a chance to kind of pull those out and answer questions they had, have them ask them live, use the Q&A box, and really provide an opportunity to hear their voice and make connections with other people that were facing some of those same challenges. This week we did one surrounded on the topic of Bookshare and Learning Ally. And that was over close to 300 people across the state participated in that one. Again, that same type of format with providing each district with an opportunity to have a voice and ask questions. And then we posted those live on our website, which is tlc-mtss.com. And so both the recording and the transcript from our closed captionists were there, as well as the resources. And kind of tagging on trainings that people that wanted additional trainings as we move forward, they could get those training opportunities, but not starting with that training, just surrounding them with a group of people that they can connect with that had common questions. We have another one coming up on math on the 22nd. And then at the end of the month, we're doing one on UDL. We also have our spring, every fall and spring, we have professional learning communities for all the AT specialists in Florida. Those were always face-to-face. Those have all turned into a virtual format, along with some pre-setting up. So not a full day for a full day, but asynchronous and synchronous to answer some of the unique challenges that our AT specialists are having in supporting families. We decided we have a lot of our staff are very highly trained, but we invested in just this week in an unlimited subscription to the ATIA webinars so that our staff could then work with the AT specialists to connect with any educator in Florida, gen ed, special ed, SLPs. They could take the same webinar and then focus our efforts on coaching and follow-up so that people could kind of get the same learning to support the students across the areas that they needed to focus on. So we went ahead and invested in that subscription for a whole year to support in a different way, instead of spending our efforts in turning all of our trainings into online trainings, to focus more on coaching and supporting and making those connections. So if there's a gen ed teacher that is interested in making sure she has that connection back to the other people that can support her on that topic. So again, when I think about the UDL framework and looking at that executive functioning and the need to really set some goals and support planning and some strategies for families, guiding them and selecting small goals. When I facilitated one of our conversations, I'm a speech pathologist by background. So the conversation about now we don't have all this other thing to think about, so we can really focus on some good aided language. What are the 3 activities that a family may enjoy at home, storybook reading, or whatever it happens to be? We can really have an opportunity to coach families and guide them on some aided language and support them and slow down that pace. I had one of the AT specialists say that the parent she was working with said, "That's it? That's all I have to do?" And so I think there is an opportunity to really support families in taking a deep breath and not being so overwhelmed with everything coming at them. And I think that's where we really need to put our efforts. my biggest reflection is the affirmation that teachers, what they do best is teach. What they care about the most are their students, right? And it's so exciting to see that they're so open to students really showing what they can do through whatever way is the most engaging. You know, whether it's a video or a different way they hadn't thought about. And so I'm hoping that these experiences will transfer back when we get back to the brick and mortar, and that our UDL opportunities for students expand and kind of support learning as we move forward. So that's what I got. That's what's happening on the East Coast.
Well, so Janet, thank you. And actually, you know, I'm really glad that you addressed some of the questions that I was having rattle around in my own head. You know, we have spent a lot of time, and rightfully so. Obviously, we're in a human-centered industry that is focused on education and learning for students. But there's another stakeholder that we have been not really talking about, right? And that stakeholder is other teachers, other educators. How this is, you know, even in Columbus, you know, this is still something that's new, right? Like, you've had e-learning days for a long time, but I don't think that anybody's been prepared to teach the rest of their school year in an e-learning setting, or I don't think that they have developed their portfolio of digital tools and digital knowledge. Right, like that just didn't happen. But those teachers still sit on that line. Those educators still sit on that line, and they have parents saying, "What do you have for me? What do you have for me?" In this kind of like this consumer resource way, right? So my big question is, like, how are you supporting teachers? Not just how are you supporting them socially, emotionally, but how are you helping them triage the learning crisis as it comes to their front line? That's for all four of our panelists. It's one of the big questions that I think that a lot of people are asking. Like, what do I do? Give me like the 3 things I need to do today.
So number one, you have to set a goal, Brian, and we know that's where the UDL guidelines help us start. You know, I think that stop and think in that coaching model is critical when we look at how to start and get a sense of what can I do that's going to be effective and efficient and really support students and families. And they have to go together. It's not just, you know, when we're in a brick and mortar, oftentimes we don't think of that family component, but now we have to. And I think we should always, however, I think it's more critical at this point. And so kind of setting that goal and really guiding them to that stop and think and that coaching model. Set an objective, look at your schedule, look at that self-monitor and reflection, and taking it in smaller chunks. For me, many of those, the 15, whether we're talking about Office 365 or aided language or environmental communication teaching, whatever it is, we still go back to those critical components to really give families a good foundation that they feel they can do every day. And the feedback we're getting is like, oh my gosh, okay, this we can do, you know, and not contribute to that stress.
And I think that from a pedagogical view like that and an andragogical view, that those things make sense, of course, right? Set your goals, look for the intentional barriers, all of those pieces make sense, but I don't even know how to put an online lesson together. I don't know how to make it not just activity based, but actually have it be deeper learning. So what I really like that you had mentioned, Jen, is that you're having kind of like these free trainings around software that will help. But then as far as how do I construct online curriculum, how are you folks addressing, how is everybody, all the districts that are present and represented here, how are they addressing that for teachers?
This is Kathy from California, and I know many of our districts are having like daily meetings at the end of the day to kind of problem solve. How did it go? What went well? What do you need different? What do you need? And so a lot of the different coaches are having like mini PLCs with the teachers that they're supporting or the directors are supporting. Because these teachers also need that empathy and come on, you can do it kind of support that we often think, oh, it's just the families. But a lot of these teachers are also home with a lot of children that they're supposed to be teaching and doing their lessons. So it's been, again, I think that empathy piece is huge and we need to constantly go back to that we're all doing the best we can. And I even know a friend who, had never done Zoom before. And she was like, I got to do Zoom. So their director had actually had like a Zoom practice meetings like 3 or 4 times before they got started. And it's that, getting down to what are the barriers for you? What do you need support with? And then that constant checking in and support, I think, is something that's just going to go on forever. I mean, maybe it's a good model that teachers need more of this actually once they're in their classroom again. I mean, it's something to just think about, but I'm babbling.
One thing I have to say that we have purposefully paused on is the bombardment of the resources. And in every conversation, we go back to what have they already selected? What are those tools that are high quality, that the district has already adopted, that they're using, that there are training and resources? We don't know all the stuff that's free. You don't know what's being collected on a student. You don't know how that's being used. So there's a lot of noise out there. And so kind of cutting through some of that noise and saying, what has your district adopted? In Florida, we've been so fortunate. The summit has been here many years. We have the Assistive Technology Industry Association Conference. We have a lot of training and resources, and many districts have adopted very good tools that can support student in their learning. So I think that's where we're trying to say, let's focus there and then look at how that learning management system works with the tools that the student may have at home, whether it's only a phone if they're in some locations, or they were able to get a Chromebook, or if they're using Teams. So that's where those focused conversations have helped us kind of drill down and kind of get a better focus and kind of get rid of some of the noise so that we can think of how that student can learn best. What are other ways they can respond or show their work? That's what's opening some of the eyes for many of our educators who didn't realize, wow, I didn't know they knew how they're showing what they know, because there's so much more flexibility right now. And that's very exciting to hear. The stories we're hearing are very exciting.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. Everybody's saying this whole idea. I think Brenny's talked about it, Kathy did, and Janet too, about, not quality, but quantity, and really thinking about driving home, getting the things that we know are important for kids to know, and making that first on the list. And as you said, Janet, cutting through the noise, I think that's so important. I'm going to ask Carrie to join us in the conversation now. Carrie's batting cleanup for us. And so, Carrie, you get to join, you're muted. We're going to ask you to share the perspective of things that are happening in Fraser, and then we'll close tonight out by having a whole group conversation. We'll ask any follow-up questions that come in from the Twitter users or anyone from in the chat. So Carrie, I'm gonna bring up the slide deck and let you go ahead and get started.
Thanks. Thank you. First of all, I have learned, as always, whenever I'm on these webinars, a ton from everybody on the panel. Kathy, I've already emailed my special ed director, mental health team, your resources, and everything I've heard from the rest of the group is very affirming to the work that we've been doing in Fraser. So, Brenny, your story really resonated with me. A lot of the things that we are doing in Fraser right now are very, very similar to the experiences that you shared. It really connected with me. And, one of the things we said a lot about in our district too is, quality over quantity, less is more. So when I hear, phrases like that, I find that to be a great affirmation. So with that, if you want to start my slide deck, that would be fantastic. I'll go to the next slide, please. So we have taken the approach that the COVID-19 crisis is something we cannot control, but we can control how we respond. And I've been sharing the idea that we want to be proactive versus reactive. And we use this quote quite a bit. I cannot change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my destination. And UDL has really been that guiding principle. It's our pedagogy that our strategic plan is based upon. It is really a core value of our district. So I would hope if you talk to somebody, they would do a lot of the things that you talked about, Brenny. They would bring up that framework, and it wouldn't be something new to them. So I think when we talk about the work we've been doing, if you could go to the next slide, please, we kept talking about we have to stay the course, whether we are digital or we're in a blended learning environment or we're in the brick and mortar of our schools. We have to stay the course with what we believe to be what was working and what we feel is working well. We are very fortunate, we're one-to-one. So when we were told on Thursday night that school was going to be shutting down, I think people were very surprised by that in our county. So the next day, our students were told, like everyone else, clean out your lockers. We don't know when you're coming back, and make sure you take your devices home. So K2 did not typically take their iPads home with them. They left them in the room. So we had to deploy 1,400 iPads in K2 that day. And our tech department was amazing. We got all of those out. We did have some people picking them up the next week, but we managed to get all of our iPads out for K8, and everybody has their MacBook Airs at the high school. So 9, 12 all had their devices. We told teachers to take everything home. So that was a big lift. And a lot of the things Brenny talked about, we struggled with hotspots, jockeying with Verizon to get the hotspots and making sure people had the Wi-Fi. So a lot of those things were things we had to deal with right away. So if you could go to the next slide. I tried to outline 4 things that were really important as the superintendent that I had to respond to right away with the crisis. And probably the biggest thing on my plate was equity. And we talk so frequently about equity when we're doing design thinking and when we're thinking about our students. So that was the top priority for me as the district leader. And we made sure that everyone had their devices. We made sure we were prepared for the anticipation of families not having hotspots. We also put together a very comprehensive plan. We created a COVID-19 page, which a lot of people had done, but we made it very specific to the technology resources we have. And I know Sue's going to share that slide deck with you. And one of the things we did right off the bat was we use It's Learning. We use, GoToMeeting, and we have some core tools that we used. And we said, we're not going to start using a bunch of different tools. We know these are the things people feel really comfortable with. So we're going to stick with those tools, and we're going to make sure families know if they're down, because when we started to use them that first week, I think everybody was like on Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever it was. So we established right away places that we could send our families to see what the status was if things weren't working properly. And then we also spent a lot of time reviewing our data to identify students who hadn't connected. And we reached out to them personally by phone. So that equity piece was something we addressed right away. Next slide, please. The second piece was professional development. This is probably the best thing that's come out of the pandemic, is that you can really do PD now whenever you want it, because the kids can get their content and you can have a GoToMeeting with the staff. So there is no more subs or anything like that. So I've said that is the one silver lining that has come out of this whole insanity. So we were very fortunate that GoToMeeting partnered with us, and they actually just they did it. They were willing to give us free GoToMeeting license and WebEx licenses if they could use us as a case study. So we said, sure. So we have single sign-on to GoToMeeting. So every kid, everybody in the district, we're like committed to GoToMeeting. I'm probably going to wear a t-shirt that says, thank you, GoToMeeting, but it has worked out really well for us. So that's been a tremendous benefit. So I think letting families know that that was our resource we were going to do all of our video conferencing with was great. We did a couple of things right away. You know, on Wednesday, we were just out of school. So we did a full day of virtual PD. And we went over with everybody what our plan was going to be. And again, I stressed to our teachers that we needed to own the course. We were going to make mistakes, but we were all going to be a team through this. And we went over again saying, we're going to not come out with any new tools. Elementary uses It's Learning, the high school and middle school use Blackboard. We were sticking with that. I said, don't go start getting real crafty, but we can do that down the line. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. On the 14th, we're going to be moving into what we're calling phase 2. Obviously in Michigan, we've been told that we will no longer be in school. So we are probably one of the few districts in our state that are competency based. So we feel pretty confident that we can keep moving forward with our grading and credit practices. We're going to look at our competencies and decide what we're going to keep for all of our courses, what we're going to push into next year, and what we can kind of live without. And if you ever wanted to make teachers use performance tasks, this is the time to do it because they can't give any tests. So we've been working really hard with our Macomb UDL team to work on performance tasks all year. Well, we're going to be trying them out the next 8 weeks. So we're really striving to implement our UDL strategies to get everybody on board with that. So that's our big next lift. Next slide, please. And the other piece, and this is probably because of the lens of being a superintendent, is data collection. It's very important to me, as it is, I'm sure, for many of you, to make sure what you're doing is working. So we've put together kind of a list of things that are going to help us make sure kids are being engaged, because you don't have the usual attendance you're taking every day, or seeing the whites of their eyes, as we like to say. So we've created a list of different things we're going to be using. We're going to be using, as Brenny talked about, the data from the learning management system, the history data from GoToMeeting. That has been wonderful. We've had like an enormous amount of connections, and that provides us a lot of great data. And it also allows the teachers to record so people can watch them again. We're using the gradebook, our Power School information. We're also using Google Docs to document when teachers are correcting and are connecting and keeping track of the kids that weren't online. And then we're using Illuminate, our data warehouse, for our staff to easily, we're making a quick assessment at the end of each week for every kid. We have about 5,000 kiddos, and they either write a contact or no contact. And that way we can create reports that will show us maybe a whole family is disengaged, or maybe it's just, Johnny who's blowing off Algebra 2 right now. And that is going to be the next layer of engagement that we're putting into place. That was something our instructional consultants came up with, because we were, concerned about how can we leverage some of our ancillary staff that we've had to kind of reassign, like our paras and things like that. So they'll be able to make those phone calls, and we created a script for them. So that's data collection. Next slide, please. The other piece, intentional communication. And this, again, is really something we had to be very mindful of because of the whole COVID-19 situation. When you're in a state of, and this is not reality, I keep telling people, this is not the way you would want to do blended learning or hybrid learning or any of those kinds of things. I mean, you want to be able to not have to stand 6 feet apart from people all the time. So I really stress that this is not reality. So I talk about the fact that when you're in a crisis like this, you have to kind of take a almost like a military approach to things. And we came up with a ton of protocols. I was meeting with my admin team every day, and then my building principals 3 times a week for the first 3 weeks. My principals were having weekly staff meetings. Principals were having weekly grade level department meetings. And then I was having virtual board meetings every week. And I think in a crisis like this, you can't over communicate. Teachers wanted information, and I would do a WebEx. I'd have 350 people registered and ready to go in like 2 hours. It was really overwhelming. So I think that intentional communication is super important. And I put the link to our website. You can see all of like the letters we've sent out to families, and I've tried really hard to document that story. So next slide, please. And then I know we've talked a lot today about the instruction and the learning opportunities. There were really 4 big things I stressed when we left at the in March. I said to please use resources our students are familiar with. We gave them a list also of common resources just to remind them about. We used Seesaw, for instance. Everybody used Zern. So we generated a list right away of common resources for teachers in case they kind of forgot about that. And we gave them a nice how-to, and that's on our website as well. And then the biggest things we left with were, you've got to check in on social and emotional well-being first. Don't worry about content. Don't worry about, getting through those lessons and things like that. We really worked on, we do a lot of restorative practices. People were doing virtual circles. That was the most important thing we really stressed. And then the other piece was you had to be mindful of various family situations and schedules. And I think that's hard for our teachers because they're so routine orientated. And we just said, look, you've got to be, not everybody is in the same boat that we are. And they've really risen to that occasion. So that's been really a big piece. Next slide, please. So I got like 3 slides that I like to say are kind of the nuts and bolts of what we've done. And I told the board, I've been saying to them, we have a plan, we're owning our course. And there are, I want to say, 5 groups of people that as district leaders, I think if you can keep those groups updated regularly, you're going to be okay. And that's the Board of Ed really needs to understand what's going on. And I know that's sometimes challenging for teachers to understand, she's spending so much time, or we've got to tell the board. That's crucial because they are very connected in the community and they can really help tell your story the way you want it to be told. I have a good relationship with our teacher union, and I meet with the board, the president of the teachers union once a week. My ad team and my cabinet, we meet at least 3 times a week. I'm going to scale that down to 2 next week. And then meeting with the staff, and I'm not just saying the teaching staff, the paras, bringing everybody into the conversation, O&M, transportation, food service. In a crisis like this, those are your best advocates. And they're the ones still working. Our food service people are still going in. And that is just a testament, I think, to our community. So when I say staff, I send the updates to everybody. I don't care if you're the building sub at the elementary, you're getting the updates. I think that's really important. And then obviously the community updates as well. So that is really a top priority. So the second slide, if you could go to that one there. This was a tool we're using right now to help with our continuity of learning for 7-12. We really try to apply and you only see step 1 there, but when you get down to once they've decided what competencies we're going to keep, and we started to talk about assessments, on this document, you're going to see where we're really asking teachers to think about what is this evidence of student learning going to look like, and how are you going to use those principles of UDL to let kids show what they know in a different way? And then how will you support the instruction to allow the students to be able to show what they know in those ways? So we're excited about having them go through this process. I think the teachers feel a kind of a sense of relief that they're going to own their their courses, and they're going to work with their PLCs. As part of our plan, we are asking the PLCs to set a time up once a week for 2 hours when their PLC meets, and they do that on their own. So like math can meet Mondays from 8 to 10, and then they just don't do any webinars at those times. So we have like a big Google spreadsheet that, they keep track of when the different PLCs meet and then when they meet with kids so things don't overlap. So this was a really important tool at the secondary level. And then they put this into Blackboard. Next slide, please. And then at the elementary, one of the pieces of feedback we got from our elementary families was that they really wanted to have a common space of really setting up its learning in a very clear way. And we decided that we were going to have our its learning template pushed out with these colors and this very specific space for families to access the content. So we're going to roll that out as a template in its learning. So families with, a second grader and a fifth grader, they'd all see the content and the links and the videos in a very similar order. So our instructional coaches put this together. So you can see at the top, if you're a first grader, you'll know when your go-to meetings are, and everything will be in there. So that was feedback that we got from the families, and all of this content is linked in the slide deck. Next slide, please. And then the assessment piece I was telling you about, we're using Illuminate, and this is a wonderful tool. I mean, you could use whatever you have in your district. If you have like ExamView, or we just created a assessment, and we built a what we're calling our EOLO weekly student contact log, and then our counselors are going to follow up with students on that. So student engagement is probably my biggest concern. That's always the principle of UDL I love the most. And when kids are not in front of you all the time, it's really important that we have some strong protocols to address student engagement. Next slide. This is my favorite slide. Leadership matters. I don't care if you're a classroom teacher, food service, right now, leadership matters more than any other time. And I tell that to my principals. We talk about that all the time. And we all need to be leaders right now, because we're not going to do this perfectly, and that's okay. And we have to, though, seize this opportunity, because I don't know when we're going to get another opportunity where there's no state testing, no third grade reading law. I mean, it's kind of like the Wild West right now of instruction. And I know we're really scared, but it's kind of an opportunity we're not going to get again. And I keep saying, let's lead, let's be the best we can be. And, we're going to make mistakes along the way. And that leads me to my last slide, which is we're all in this together. And that is the truth. We are all in this together, and we're going to get through this, and we're going to be stronger when we get to go back. It's going to be a different world, though. I really believe that. And I think, we're not going to be the same after, staying home this long and learning this way. I think families are really being transformed by this experience, and they're going to expect something different. If this is really exposed, I think, K-12 education, it puts it all out there. So thank you. That's my story.
Thank you, Carrie, and thanks for sharing that. I'm going to quote a friend of mine. Many of you probably know Jeff Diedrich. He's also often been wishing to blow up education so he could rebuild it from the ground up. And this might be our opportunity to do that, right? That, really things are changing rapidly, and perhaps it's our opportunity, as Carrie said, to really all be leaders and make that UDL part of the way we redesign it when we come back together. Brian, any questions out there that we want to address to the crowd here?
Yeah, so there are some. One of the questions that came in is around how scheduling is working. So is everyone doing 5 days a week? Is that kind of what is expected in the districts that you're working with, or is it just a few days a week? How's that kind of working out for all the four panelists?
I can tell you what Michigan is saying. They're saying that school is back in session tomorrow. It's just the buildings that are closed. So that's really the attitude that they're taking. And, you know, I think you have to be respectful of everyone's experiences right now and be empathetic that it's not going to be 8 to 3. It's going to look different every day.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's the other piece too, that kind of hinges on this. If you are doing 5 days a week, or even if you're doing a few days a week, you know, doing 8 hours of online learning is not something that even people that love online learning sign up for. And so do you have any suggestions? Does anybody, just open it up to everybody. Does anybody have any suggestions of what that learning time looks like? Or,
Yeah, Illinois put out a good document that we're using. And it's got a breakdown of, like, if you're kindergarten, their attention span is 3 to 5 minutes. And then it gives you actually quantities of what the learning or the amount of content you should put in to the learning management system each day. So we're really trying to be mindful of that. And at the high school, they're saying anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes per class each day. So those are all numbers we've given the teachers to be thinking about. And there's kind of a range in this Illinois document. And I said to everybody, lean towards the lower end right now.
Yeah, the Kansas gave some guidance too. I don't know if I think it was very similar to what's in the Illinois document. But, you know, it surprised me that maximum for a high schooler was only 3 hours. And so we just, you know, we have to be mindful of that's maximum for that kind of, this kind of online learning. So
sure.
something to
And
keep in
well,
mind.
and we have to build stamina, right? Like we build stamina in any other task. And so I think that this is one where we have to start looking at that stamina. And I think that that's smart to say it's this range, shoot for the low end of that range, and let's build up to something.
Yeah.
It's,
All right, Brian, I'm looking at our time. We
I
have
know.
reached
We could go on.
9:30.
I know, we could keep going, right?
Any last burning thing out there that we'd be remiss not to address besides our thank you?
Nope. I think that we're set. We're good.
All right, UDL chat happens every first and third Wednesday of the month. And with that, we want to say thank you to our awesome panelists. We appreciate you. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And thank you to our guests who joined us. We really appreciate your attendance and your questions. And have a wonderful night. Stay healthy, stay well. And thank you.